am I? Face the terror in the dark. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Movie Minds podcast. It is I, Joe. I am one of your hosts for the evening. I am in the dark realm right now, surrounded by shadowy forces. No, it's just my second bedroom, and it's messy. And I also have one of my co-hosts, Brandon.
How you doing, Brandon?
Hi. I'm good. I'm ready to fight, but I
and he
can't
is-
talk about it.
And,
Ah!
and he is here. Brandon's not ready to talk about it yet. We'll pry it out of him. And also, there is Brad to the digital left or right of me.
I'm Big Brad. I'm ready to roll. Here we are. I'm in the light, and I'm feeling all right.
Oh, and he's
Nice.
got rhyme. He is our resident musician, composes various themes as well. We are three teachers / amateur film critics and movie enthusiasts here to talk about different types of films. We release podcasts roughly every 2 weeks, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with a few special episodes here and there. And today we are going to be talking about a particular film codenamed for the moment Project Mayhem. Real disclaimer though, before you go further, we will potentially be diving into this somehow, but want to let you know this film is rated R. It has some really intense, mature topics, so we will say, want to make sure that you are 18 and older if you're watching this, or if you have parental permission, that is fine, but you have been warned. Listening otherwise, we will be delving into discussing this piece of cinema, and if any of that concerns you, hold off on listening. All right. And now we've gotten that out of the way. Yes, tonight we are talking about Fight Club. But we're not members, so maybe we can say we're members. We couldn't talk about it. Yes. So I'll begin with a little bit of an introduction, and then when I start running out of breath, I'll throw it to the other guys. But I'll see what I have because I'm semi-prepared tonight with the template that we are developing for our listeners. Thank you, everybody.
Very good.
All right. So, Fight Club is a sort of, I would say, a thriller / dark comedy from the year 1999, directed by David Fincher, who is a great director. One of my favorites, having done some other films, including Seven and The Game, among others. And it is starring Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, Helena Bonham Carter, and there's also some appearances by the musician Meatloaf and Jared Leto before he was super famous, I think. So basically, the film follows our unnamed protagonist, played by Edward Norton, who is basically this white-collar, wealthier, upstanding individual, supposedly working somewhere in big business. We found out it's actually in an insurance company, and he doesn't like his job very much, and he is having trouble sleeping. He's going through some depression, some anxiety, some internal anger, and he's having trouble sleeping, and he really, really doesn't like himself. He is spending a lot of his time just purchasing various goods. There's a lot of snippets and conversations in his mind as he's commenting to us about various things he's going to buy in different magazines and how that basically just drives his life because it doesn't seem like he has anything else. But eventually, he finds something to actually get him to feel alive again, get him to feel some human connection. And that is actually just going around to different support groups, whether it's different cancer groups or trauma abuse groups, things like that. And he just goes and pretends to be a victim or somebody suffering with a certain thing, like at an AA meeting. And he just connects with these different people. And he goes from different one to different one and actually starts to feel better until he encounters this other woman, played by Helena Bonham Carter, who actually does the same thing, where they're both lying and basically infiltrating these groups, and they start arguing about it. And it seems out of his frustration, he actually kind of meets this other person in his travels, somebody by the name of Tyler Durden, who's played by Brad Pitt, who has some rather rebellious ideas, basically telling him to kind of get away from his consumeristic life and abandon everything. They go out and live in this dilapidated old house. He teaches him about making soap, and he's a soap salesman. But some of the ways that he obtains his lifestyle is a little questionable, like robbing liposuction factories to take human fat to make soap. So there's some robbery there. And then he gets involved in some other things. He starts kind of tying our unnamed narrator into some other ideas, particularly starting something called a fight club, in which he gathers other men secretly to basically work out their differences and work out their frustrations with their lives and how basically unsatisfied they feel about living in modern society by beating the crap out of each other. And so there are a lot of potential themes in this movie. I won't go too much further into spoilers yet. Maybe we'll dive further into those. But basically, things escalate, and potentially they start doing other pranks with this Project Mayhem, which is kind of an extension of Fight Club, and it borders into some terroristic actions in which our narrator says, maybe this Tyler Durden guy is up to no good, and I should try to stop him, but maybe it's too late. Dun dun dun. Spoilers later on. Yeah, it had been a while since I'd seen this movie. I would say that from my backstory with it, it's one of those movies that when I was in high school, it was this thing that I feel like a lot of teenagers liked, a lot of people were really watching it, and it was just something you heard about all the time. Like, oh, you got to watch Fight Club. And when I was starting to really get into exploring cinema and looking through my greatest hits movies, great cult classics, things like that, which is I feel like when I was a teenager is when I really started to do that. Fight Club is just one of those things I came across, and for a while, as a young man, probably about the same age as a lot of our students right now, Fight Club was like one of my favorite movies for years. I wouldn't say that it necessarily is anymore, but for a long time, it was up there for me. I really like a lot of the themes in the movie. I think that there's some really great performances there. As far as the themes go, which is the main thing I'm going to focus on, and then I'll pass it off to you guys. There was obviously a commentary on just materialism, consumerism in our society, and about how it has potentially some negative aspects. It seems like there were some commentaries on the evil of capitalism and how there's kind of a dark side to that. And obviously, this idea connected to that of masculine frustration, what it means to be a man, so to speak, in our society. And also kind of takes this kind of dark approach about how to deal with that. And I actually recently saw a video. I was telling Brandon about this earlier today, actually, just by happenstance. This one guy, I don't know the channel name, I should recommend it, but he just put up like 8 movies that changed my life. And it was just like different movies and lessons that inspired them. And like, oh, this guy has pretty good taste, kind of fairly well known, but I agree with a lot of them. One of them was actually Count of Monte Cristo. And I was like, oh, that's great that somebody, he said it was underappreciated. And he mentioned this. And one thing he mentioned about it, he thought that was good about Fight Club, is that particularly through the character of Tyler Durden, it's an example of how there can be a perspective or a philosophy that when exaggerated too much, it can be very dangerous, which Fight Club shows us. But there are some elements to what Tyler Durden says that could be useful in basically changing your life, changing your perspective. And I think that might say something about why that particular character, as Brandon mentioned earlier, when we were talking about it, can have such a connection with audiences. There's something about him we find enduring, like the main character does. He's kind of adventurous. He's going against the grain. He's kind of questioning some of the aspects of society and basically everybody going to work every day, feeding this big economic boom and basically all the corporations and the CEOs and just really kind of trying to break that cycle. And I think it's something that you can really be attracted to as a younger person. But I kind of worry, to be honest, as I watched it again, that the movie could maybe have the wrong influence because a lot of times I think people watch a film, especially younger people, and they might really connect with some of the main ideas of the movie, and that might be a good thing. And it does kind of stir them to think about something a certain way. But do they see the whole picture? Because I feel like maybe it also speaks to how the film maybe teeters out a little bit towards the end, that maybe the negative aspects of Tyler Durden are kind of surpassed by all the gravitas in the beginning of the film, which is so cool and edgy, man. Whoa, with a lot of the cinematography and the industrial music in the beginning, which I liked. It was kind of a throwback, but I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'm sorry, I'm wrapping up. I had more to say than I thought, but I sometimes worry about that because I thought it was interesting having watched this movie years ago and watching again with a newer perspective. I'm like, I can see some reasons why maybe some aspects of this movie people might not fully understand because it's a cautionary tale. And I think that it's a bit mixed in that sense. But I love the themes of the movie and I love the performances. And I think it's a great story. I think it kind of starts to fall apart a little bit towards the end, which I don't know if I usually used to think, but we'll talk more about that later. I also want to talk more about some of the technical aspects of the directing, but I actually want to pass this off to you guys because I'm talking a lot. If you want to pick my brain, ask me questions. It's the best way to get me on track again. Take it away, gentlemen. what are your thoughts on Fight Club? Give me your backstories, etc.
All right, I'll go ahead.
Brad, you want to go first? Or?
Yeah. Let me go ahead because I thought that was great, Joe. That was really it was kind of stream of consciousness, but there was a lot in there. It was a similar.
That's
thing
how I
for
roll,
me.
man.
Yeah, it was a similar thing for me. I remember when it came out, and uh, it's very cool. In one way, like the movie's time stamped from that period. Like it it it, it almost looks dated because of
Uh-oh.
the fashion and the things like that. But it is a little like
Yeah.
a little nostalgic, a little in a weird way for that. But looking at it now, as I'm older, as I'm married, as I have children, I see things. I like what you said. If someone's in high school or something, someone's a young man, like it's very easy for young men to jive with this movie in a way. I think it's a very masculine movie. And I don't always think it's good in a good way either. I think sometimes it's a caricature of masculinity. It's very I don't like to use the phrase, but people nowadays will talk about toxic masculinity or
Mhm.
but it's there to the point where there's barely any women in the movie.
Uh-huh.
It's just a
Yeah.
man movie. Yeah, so it's very easy. I don't know how to pick because you went through so much. It
I'm
definitely
sorry.
speaks about no. I'm just trying to. I don't want to repeat what you said, but it definitely speaks about consumerism and the cancer that is consumerism, like the soul sucking reality of living. Like you see him in his little apartment looking at IKEA. It's funny. It's supposed to be funny. He's on the toilet. He's looking at the IKEA catalog. Like his father would have been looking at pornography, which neither one is good. But like he's looking through there. I want to order. I forget what he was ordering. Something
Yeah,
ridiculous.
but it's like less human though. It's
Yeah,
even less humanized in a way. Yeah.
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 And we're still living in the echoes of that time too. You had the beginning of the internet then. You had the beginning of the big like Starbucks and stuff like that going on. You still have that now. Um, so it's very nihilistic. Like it's very nihilistic. So it can be. I was surprised. I hadn't seen it in a while, and I'm like, man, this is very dark.
Yep.
Even the lighting's dark. A lot of it takes place at night. It's like dark. It makes you feel like you want to.
Bleak.
Yeah, it's bleak. Like, what else do I have to do but fight? Like, you get to the point where like you're stripped of all the other material things. Like, could you see all this stuff? I like where he works. His boss is a complete like cartoon character. And then he goes and looks at car wreckage. He looks at the aftermath of wrecks. He's on the plane.
Terrible job.
Yeah. So uh, I don't want to go too much. Brandon goes that, but I wanted to talk about how nihilistic it is, how a caricature of masculinity it is, and it is a cautionary tale. I know Polinick, the author. I did hear him say one time he wrote this as kind of an act of rebellion against the industry and against things. He kind of has an interesting backstory himself, the author, from different things I've heard. And
On
so
that note, to our listeners, this is also a book. I don't think Joe mentioned that. There is a book that came out before the movie. Sorry, go ahead.
Somehow my whole spiel, I forgot to mention that. But yeah, my wife really likes him. I got to read Fight Club. I didn't have a chance to read it.
I've never read it. Go ahead. And I think you mentioned this the other day. Like they had no idea how to market this movie.
Oh, the trailer! Did you guys watch the trailer? It's horrible. The trailer's horrible.
I haven't seen it recently. I've seen it before, but what is the trailer? I forget. Like, what are they?
It's like, well, you know how the movie, like you said, it's really bleak, and it's more of like a drama thriller, maybe like a super dark comedy, and it just kind of like elevates into and escalates into a thriller. But when you see the trailer, they basically hype up that it's like it's like a romance / buddy comedy that maybe has like a little bit of crime, like, oh, hijinks, he's shooting a gun because he's drunk or something. It's marketed like it is a completely different film, and it's like and it is a very strange, complicated film. It's hard to peg down into a specific genre. Actually, when I was looking it up, it didn't really have a genre listed, so I just said like thriller, dark comedy. But yeah, I guess when they were marketing it, they were like, yeah, how do we sell this movie? And it didn't do very well initially, from what I understand. It has kind of a cult following over time, and I think that's part of it. They didn't know what direction to market it in. I think they should have just leaned into a like dark thriller because that's what it is,
Yeah.
with some comedy sprinkled in.
Yeah.
And the movie, the movie has made more money like later. It didn't make a lot of money in the early 2000s, late 90s. Like it's made more money like over time. But
a lot of good
Brad,
movies do that. They take time it takes time to mature and people to come around to it. Because like you said, you get to people, the business aspect of it, they're trying to market it, and sometimes they bumble that. And people just aren't going to go to the movies with that. What even is this? They'll go see like Rush Hour or whatever. I don't know what this is, and it's dark. It is dark. It's visceral. You get in there. So depending on I could imagine back then, depending on who went and saw the movie, and they're trying to explain the movie to you.
You're right. In a quick conversation, like word of mouth. Well, you see, there's this guy, and he met this girl, and then there's this other guy who is this other, and there's this. They'll be like, "Huh? What? I just want to. Do you shoot somebody? Is there action? Like, you're right.
Yeah.
Even like through word of mouth, it involves a conversation. It's not a quick. Oh yeah, that was good. You should see it. Like you almost have to explain more, and that it almost kind of speaks to a conversation we may have in the future about the movies being an industry, being kind of obviously. Selling a product as well. They're a business, but it's also trying to have these creators, these filmmakers and directors, writers. They're trying to make a work of art that's speaking to people, trying to connect a lot of the time, and be entertaining as well. So with the marketing, it can be really tough for that. And I feel like this is one where it fell to the wayside a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brad, did you before I rudely interrupted you, sorry, did you want to finish your piece on the stuff from the book you were talking about?
Oh no, I just wanted to mention there's actually an interview fairly recent with what's his first name again? Polinick's first name?
Chuck?
Chuck. Yeah. Chuck Palahniuk. There's an interview with him fairly recently that looks interesting. I only got to see like the first 15 minutes of it online. But anyway, he was talking about that. Apparently too, his grandfather murdered his grandmother. Tried to kill his father, like went through the house and killed everybody. He's from Washington State, so this takes place in like Seattle. But anyway, like he wanted to put that kind of energy into this. And so I've never read the book, but I imagine watching the movie, this is one of those movies that maybe reflects the book pretty well. That they didn't fool around with it too much.
Well, I haven't read it either. I will speak to from what I understand about a lot of his work, he does dive into a lot of those really difficult, uncomfortable, grimy subjects, and that's kind of he's almost like he goes those places to shock people. But I think he is very visceral, like you said, and also has a lot to do with abuse, violence, sexual stuff. He goes there, and it's very raw. And as far as the book goes, I need to read that thing. But one thing I do know is different is the ending. I know the ending is a little different.
Okay.
I know about the ending being a little different. And if you guys want to know at some point, I'll let you know. I just know what happens in the end. That's it.
Okay. I would.
Other than that, I think
I would be interested to know how it's different.
yeah, I'll tell you guys a bit if you want.
Okay. Brandon, you want to jump in on this or? Because this is the first time you've seen it, right? You hadn't seen it.
Yeah, first time. Heard a lot about it growing up. I was never growing up really into those like thriller fighting movies. In fact, I knew so little about the film that I thought it was like when I was in high school, like a UFC film or something. So I never even like attempted to watch this movie until Movie Minds. And
can I
be honest?
I cut you off a second because I just wanted to put something funny in there. My wife had never seen Fight Club either. And she's like, "Oh, this is completely different than I thought it was going to be." I'm like, "What did you think?" She's like, "I thought it was like," and she was trying to describe the movie. Like, there's a movie. They're like they're racing cars. It's got the guy who sings the thong song. I'm like, too fast, too furious. You remember that? The Fast and the Furious or whatever. She thought it was she thought it was a movie like that. I'm like, anyway, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you know what's funny? Sorry, real quick on that note, I called, and I'm going to mention him later in the film or in the podcast. I told him I would give him a shout out. My friend Tyler, who lives in Virginia. I have two friends, Tyler. This one lives in Virginia. He's married to my wife's cousin.
What's his last
And
name?
Brandon, you have a friend named Tyler?
Is it you?
I have two.
Tyler.
In fact, he's right over there with me right now. There
Brandon,
he is. He
you,
just popped in.
Brandon, is your name not really Brandon? Are you the nameless narrator? Are you Edward Norton? Are you involved with Project Mayhem? Don't talk about Project Mayhem.
I do have the spiky late
You
90s
can
hair.
pass
I
for
mean, I
Edward
could
Norton.
totally pull off Edward Norton.
What?
Anyway.
No, I can see Edward Norton like, what? No, I'm not.
I am Brandon stifling rage.
Stifling.
Anyway, Tyler, not Tyler Durden, or so we think, told me when I was talking to him on the phone on Thanksgiving, I was like, so I've never seen Fight Club. What is it? And I was like, is it like Fast and the Furious? I literally said Fast and the Furious.
No.
Yeah. And he was like, no, man. And I really like what he said because he's late 30s. And I was like, hey, can I use that on the podcast? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he identified the movie as, in fact, Brad, he's probably only a little bit younger than you. And he said it's his generation's Catcher in the Rye. That's how he described the movie. He said there's definitely a Fight Club group. There's definitely a personality of Fight Club. He's like, I was probably one of those guys at one time, not anymore. But he said it had such a big impact. I forget his exact words, but he definitely he compared it to the late like the late 90s Catcher in the Rye. Like it has this huge cult following now, and you either really like it or you really don't. You know what I'm saying? But I did write a few notes down. I didn't do timestamps on this one. One, because it's like a over 2 hour long movie, and I wanted to enjoy my Thanksgiving break, right? So I didn't spend like 4 hours. Number two, I actually got really into the movie. So here's kind of my takeaway with fresh eyes. One, I really liked the opening. I liked how the whole thing started with, he's describing what he does for a living. He goes into IKEA. You don't really know why he's telling you any of these things. And then all of a sudden, Tyler Durden shows up. And then what was really good about the movie, I think, was the flow of it. Like, you really had to be paying attention because that one thing that he mentioned earlier in the film, yeah, that comes back like an hour and a half later, but it's still important. You know what I mean? So it's a movie where I would tell somebody, hey, if you're going to watch this, you really need to pay attention to the beginning and the characters. Like Meatloaf comes back later, like because what happens in the beginning is so essentially important to the end of the film. And then if you go back and watch it and, the big reveal and spoiler alert, can we give the spoiler? Can I talk about the big spoiler? Like this
Spoilers again. Go ahead.
Okay. So like when the big reveal happens that Tyler Durden is not a real person, it's just a figment of the narrator's imagination. You go, whoa. I did that. I was on the couch. I was like, what? Anyway, when you hear that, when you go back, it makes sense. And there's some things I wrote down, and looking back at my notes as you guys were talking, there's things that I'm looking back now, and I'm like, oh, that made sense there. That made sense. At the time, I didn't know why I was writing it. And then once I found out that Tyler Durden, played by Brad Pitt, is not a real guy, I'm like, oh, that's why I wrote that down. That's why I thought that was important. So when you go back and watch it, it kind of foreshadows that this man is not real, right? But I love the opening. I loved how it you really had to be paying attention to it. Like IKEA comes back later, and what's really interesting is the whole point of Project Mayhem was to blow up the credit card company buildings, right? And I'm like, oh, he ordered a lot of crap from IKEA that he couldn't afford.
That's
Now
the
he's
whole
in
thing.
debt,
Yeah.
right?
He's so
Like,
angry about it.
it's
Yeah.
yeah. So I really liked that. You know what the movie, especially at the work scenes, it really reminded me of, and I think it's just a salute to that era, 1999, which, as we've said before, I think on this podcast, great year in general. I mean, Blink 182's All the Small Things came out. Um, Great time in cinema. But it
Yes.
reminded me a lot
The cool
of
Prince song
off.
too.
Yeah, Prince. Yeah, even though that was a few years earlier. But it really reminded me a lot of Office Space, right? In the
Yeah.
sense that the
Yeah.
main character hates his job and he's looking for something more out of life, just like Luke Wilson's, or no, it wasn't Luke Wilson, was it? Who was the main character in Office Space? Who was the
Oh,
who was the
he's not a big actor. He's
No.
mostly known for that. But that the Office Space guy called.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the same premise, right? You go into a mundane job, you're there all day, you do
case
TPS
of the
reports, and then
Mondays.
you go home.
Case the Mondays. Well, it's funny. you
Sounds
mention
like
that,
someone's
Brandon,
got a case of the Mondays.
Somebody get my stapler. We should talk about Office Space.
Yeah.
No, there is. It's interesting you point that out, Brandon, because that has been brought up. That there's something about that era that kind of culminated in that year. '99 is a great year for movies, where you've got like the guy who's kind of your average American as an office worker, drone, working for some big corporation, feeling kind of empty, frustrated, soulless. You got Office Space, you got Fight Club, you got The Matrix, kind of,
Mhm.
and you've also got American Beauty's another one. They're all kind of dealing with that internal frustration, of course, going different ways with it, but they're all about kind of searching for something more and breaking out of that system. So yeah, Fight Club's just another example of that. That's a good point.
Mhm.
And yes, Blink
Totally.
182 is all
Thanks.
the small things came out in 99. So, great staple.
Oh,
Had to
yeah,
get that in,
totally.
didn't you? Should we just do like a Blink 182 cast? Just like sometime just for you? Blink cast. Blink 101.
I really hope that Mark Hoppus, Tom DeLonge, and Travis Barker find this podcast and say, wow, that guy and those guys that do that podcast, we got to get them. Here's the tickets. You got to come on tour with us, and then the rest will be history. We're basically like Blink 182, where there's three guys. We do things we love. Yeah.
Just like Blink.
Well, you know what? In a way, you are correct. We are our own small version of Blink 182. I do want the instruments, though. Movie Minds band has to happen, but I don't know if we can call Movie Minds. Mind of Music or
one of us
something?
plays drums, one of us plays bass, and one of us plays guitar. There you go.
Mhm. Yeah.
I like. I made a note of the 8 rules of Fight Club. One of my favorite scenes was when Tyler is talking to, like, he gets all these guys to come, and he like makes some joke like, "Wow, we look like we have more people," and everybody laughs, and he's like, "Which means you guys broke the first rule of Fight Club," and then you just see the look on everyone's face like,
We did. You're right. Oh. Brandon, I wanted to please hold on to your thoughts. I want to kind of go off on another area that because you make me think of something related to that. Another great thing I think about the Tyler Durden character and persona to realize too is interesting is he kind of builds him up as thinking, oh, I want to go against the authority, against the system, break away and be adventurous, be a rebel, all that stuff. Tyler Durden is a huge hypocrite. Because what he does is he gets everybody to conform to his ideas, take away their individuality, and basically make them soulless soldiers just for a different purpose. So he kind of uses his powers for evil and just does the same thing again, just a more violent, but admittedly more direct and perhaps honest direction. But he's a hypocrite to the people that he joined his cause. He manipulates a bunch of poor lost people, and it's kind of reminiscent of how some leaders kind of gather people to them when they're disenfranchised and frustrated and start their own movements. Thought that was something that really really stuck out to me more this time. So he's a kind of an evil force there.
Well, I'm happy you said that, because usually, like, when it comes to movies and books, and our producer, my wife, will attest to this, I love Tyler Durden. I do.
Oh.
And I really love anti-heroes. Tyler Durden is a great anti-hero. Like almost textbook anti-hero, like Severus Snape level anti-hero, in my opinion. And you guys, I don't know if Brad knew, but I know Joe does. I love Severus Snape from the Harry Potter series. But anyway, great point. I was so into when they were going over their historical fights, I was thinking Abraham Lincoln before they said Abraham Lincoln. I was like, I would pick Abraham Lincoln.
He was
And then
he was really a boxer.
yeah,
Like, yeah, long reach. Yeah, he really could box.
Oh, and
I thought it
also,
was a great yeah, go ahead.
also, you're right. Another reference of greatness. There's a Star Trek reference in here. Wants to fight William Shatner.
Oh, William
Edward Norton
Shatner.
wants
I
to
thought,
fight Shatner.
yeah,
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 that was great. Wants to really beat up William
yeah,
Shatner.
yeah. William
I did
Shatner
think
keeps
of you.
showing up on Movie Minds.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you that he's gonna show up eventually in more direct form. I gotta make
You
it happen.
want to fight me? Go ahead and take it.
Look, get out your frustrations. I know you can take it out
Yeah.
on me. I'm Jim.
They do that shot. Anyway,
Watch it enter the double kick.
I thought, yeah. You know what,
Oh.
Brandon? You mentioned the 8 rules of Fight Club. I was just thinking about that. I forgot there was 8 rules because I was going to say something before. This movie, I pointed out the nihilism of it, like the postmodern, like minimalism, whatever you want to call it. It's very stark, and you're like he talks about there's very little spirituality in it. He says like we are God's unwanted children. We're the all singing, all dancing crap of the world. It's very but it's almost it does have a kind of spirituality to it. There's almost a rite of passage, like with the lie, he kisses him in the burning, like he's like, don't breathe it away, don't go down that path, like embrace that pain of it. It almost has or it's trying to be almost some kind of like a Buddhist feel to it. You have the noble eightfold path in Buddhism. So that's what I was thinking of, that 8 rules of Fight Club, the eightfold path in Buddhism. Like, because there's different forms of Buddhism, but there are some forms of Buddhism that a lot of those that seem to be nihilistic. That seem to be that kind of way. So, I thought that was interesting when you mentioned the 8 rules of Fight Club. And it's this film too is like very full of death. He's going to these groups with all these different things. Now it's kind of funny too. Like you got Meatloaf with his giant breasts, and like it's a pretty good job. But like it's surrounded by death, and so it's almost like they're trying to pull life out of that. Like that's part of the meaning of Fight Club. Like he talks about you never felt so alive as when you're fighting a guy, and it's controlled. So they have that control there. And just to bring some like personal experience to it, because I was talking to my wife and she couldn't really relate, but I did say like, I've been in fights, and there's something about like the feeling of a fight and the way you feel after a fight. Like there's nothing else that's like that. And it does give you, it's almost like a drug. I mean, it does feel good. It's weird. You're hurt, but the adrenaline or whatever else kicks in, like there's a very good feeling there to that afterward. And the idea that you can fight with somebody and then hug them afterward or like embrace them afterward, that's real. Whereas like he was living before out of these IKEA catalogs and the cornflower blue stuff, now there's a realness to it. So I think that came through for me. I do agree with you, Joe. Like you said at the beginning, it kind of loses cohesion toward the end, I thought. Upon rewatching, started to break apart a little bit for me.
And it's not. I think the message is there right there, and I think I do like what he said about how they kind of have that unit initiative where they get together and fight, and maybe it's not the best way to work out their issues, but it does make them feel alive. That violence is almost like their last resort to kind of get to something primal and deep, to almost have that connection. We're being open, we're being vulnerable, we're getting together in these spaces, being basically half naked, and we're getting up again, embracing each other. So there is something interesting there that I think Durden corrupts, and obviously he corrupts it more and turns it into this much more questionable thing and starts really kind of almost thinking of these people as disposable. But the thing about it, from a plot point that gets a little bit wacky for me, it's honestly just kind of presentation. Like, I think the whole movie is enjoyable, but I like what Brandon said. It starts off. I love the narration, from the narrator's perspective, and just cold, just kind of like dejected, like, you buy this and that, and that's in a lot of films. The '90s have that. Train Spotting
Yeah.
has that. I love that kind of just almost omniscient commentary. It's great, but it starts off really strong. You get the mystery, you get all these really intense emotions with the woman and Tyler's mystery and everything. It's good, but once you get to the point where he kind of realizes that Tyler's up to no good and Project Mayhem is everywhere and he's going to all these different airports. Like, I remember watching it a long time ago, think, oh my goodness, this is building up. It's what a big conspiracy. But it kind of gets to be a little ridiculous and cartoony towards the end. Like, when he's in the police force and he's getting interrogated, and then they turn on him and say, oh, like, you know what you're doing. They all realize that they reveal they're in Project Mayhem. Like, at first, I was thinking, initially, I think when I watched it before, I'm like, oh my goodness, this conspiracy is so deep. It's gotten everywhere, even police officers. But there's something about that where he's like, you said you'd say that, sir, and they're going to cut out his time. It's just, there's something about it. It almost becomes kind of goofy. The level that he was able to infiltrate so many aspects of society in so many cities in, I think, a relatively short period of time, kind of starts to get a little silly. And I mean, there are all the explosives. It's like, I think that there's a level of believability they kind of were aiming for, but for some reason towards the end, I think it gets a little silly there. And also, the ending of the movie it's almost like it was going one direction. Then you're going to have the character kind of turn things around when he has that reveal, kind of almost like the Greek tragedy, but then he can't quite save himself because the bombs still go off, the buildings collapse. And it's like, okay, he wanted to say that, okay, maybe that was wrong, but he still, maybe some part of him did want to blow up the credit card companies to set things back to zero, which I'm not entirely sure that's how that would work anyway. So it's like kind of an evidence of how he's deranged. So he's kind of having that romantic moment where he does exhume himself of that dark side of himself. He becomes free from the need for that darkness. He got what he needed from it, lets it go, by somehow shooting himself in the head, but that gets kind of comical. So he has that moment, but then the buildings blow up and then you have the Pixies song comes out. I don't know where mine's gone. And the tone's kind of like, it's kind of relaxed and fun. And it just seems to kind of almost contradict a lot of other things in the movie. So I just feel like it's like whimsical. It's not bad, but I just feel like it almost ends a little flat, like it didn't fully commit to one way or the other. Like, and he also has a mention of like, no one's going to get hurt. A bunch of buildings collapsed, which once again seems a bit ridiculous, but a little prophetic because 9/11 was a couple years ago. So those terroristic ideas were there in the 90s, but that just seemed a little too far-fetched, and people would get hurt. There would be consequences. So we're almost left to feel like he won, but there's also consequences. Does he still believe in these ideas? Is he backing up? Is he finding a balance? It just feels like we're left at the end of a story that didn't quite finish,
Yeah.
So that's my only real issue with the movie is I think that the ending falls short of everything else. Just a little bit. That's really stuck with me big time this time.
Yeah, I agree. Part of the, if I can use the word, the beauty of it or genius of it or whatever you want to call it, is it's focused around him in his little world.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets a little, like you said, cartoony. It's just too big. It becomes something it wasn't meant to be. It seems like it. So it's just reaching out too far. Toward the end, like you said, I agree with that. And it does echo, though, again, some of the, you mentioned 9/11. Well, the first time someone tried to bring down the World Trade Center, they had the van in the basement down there. They had the same kind of thing. 1999, I graduated that year from high school. Earlier that year, you had the Columbine shooting, which was the first time I remember that because I was a senior in high school that week in April. That was the week of my birthday. But it's very, like, I don't know that they would or could make this movie now.
I don't think they
it
could.
would not happen.
They totally could not with
because
yeah.
because like the characters are leaning towards terrorism almost being like a necessity or a good thing. It's just and that was still a time when domestic terrorism was a bigger concern. Like that was you're right, that was a bigger thing in the 90s. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
almost like a culmination.
Oklahoma City. I forgot about as well. Yeah, it's just
Oh yeah,
it was there. Yeah, and there was we were still for better or worse, like we've kind of embraced the things that they were warning about. He's warning about. Then we've embraced that. But you have in the 90s, we were talking about the 90s, but you have that time period like people are still coming of age out of the middle of the century, in the 60s, 70s, 80s. There's a different kind of feel to life, and then it's meeting what's coming. So it's like there was a lot of anticipation. The new millennium, Y2K, if you remember that kind of stuff. It's like it was like a cross. It was like the, I don't know, dawning of the age of Aquarius or whatever. It's supposed to be something different coming along. Yeah, I watched that, and it gave me like I had like an emotional response to certain things. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember something like that. It felt different kind of feeling that I don't think you'll get from a movie now, or just I think it relayed that very well. I also forgot to mention, also in the movie, Meatloaf was in the movie. And Jared Leto was in the movie. There's another musician, Ed Kowalczyk's in the movie, the lead singer of the band Live, who's from Pennsylvania.
No way.
He's a waiter
Yeah.
there, the bald guy toward the end. I actually met him twice, but he's from. But yeah, I'm like, I remember when that came out. Live's pretty cool. But anyway, like I remember, like, so there's some people there in the background of that. But yeah, just to wrap it up, I agree with you, Joe. Toward the ending, it kind of, I don't know, it kind of went a little loose.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
Fluid. Yeah.
Brad, something I want to circle back to that you said, with the lighting and the darkness of it. So you had those dark scenes, but even during the day, like if you ever watched a movie, it's kind of like whenever you had a rough night and you wake up the next day and you just have that feeling of, oh, I feel disgusting. Even the lighter scenes, like the next morning, they're like terrible. Like it's like taking the walk of shame back to like where you're coming from the next day. Like that's the feeling I had every time it was morning or every time he was at work. Like
well,
when I'm watching, I just felt disgusting. Like
he's
you know
an
what I mean?
insomniac. And if you've ever been a person, which I used to, not long after, like when I was younger, I would stay up all night a lot. I had third shift jobs sometimes, or I remember I didn't even put two and two together. I remember like it probably starting around 2000, early 2000s. I wrote a book. I wrote a short novel length book, and I'm like,
Nice.
oh wait, that guy's like, it's like a Fight Club feel to it. It's like this insomniac, and he's got like a split kind of thing going on. That was supposed to be more of like a dark superhero, but I wrote that then. I would stay up all night, and you're right. Like in the morning, it's like, what is this? And then it's everything's slow. I know what you mean. So even the daylight is dark.
Yeah.
I think they did a pretty good job of like his insomnia. Like I think, what is he saying there? When you have insomnia, everything's far away.
You're never really fully awake or asleep.
You're never
You're
really
disconnected.
Yeah, everything's. I like that scene. He's at the copier. He's in the office, like the office space. Very violent too. Like reminds me, he says, I might go office to office with a gas powered arm, whatever. He describes the rifle like pumping round after round. Yep. Or maybe you could just not bring me every piece of crap you find. Like, the first rule of Fight Club is what is this? I like when he says, I used to say some of those lines, by the way, I don't mean to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
Like someone would say, is that blood? Is that what would he say? Is that
yeah, that's blood on your face. Whatever. I get into fights. I don't care that you know about it.
Is that your blood? He's like, some of it.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Brandon. It's speaking to the cinematography and the tone, like of the film itself, the tint of it kind of permeates that griminess that's kind of throughout the whole movie, especially when they're in the house. You really get the feeling of that
Yes.
old grimy house with its leaking and all the dirt and sludge and it's rotting. Like you really feel like that's a house that is falling apart. They just found and decided to film in. Like I could believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of reflects what's
Hey,
going
so
on inside.
real quick, I have a few more things I wanted to bring up if that's cool. Um, One, I really wanted to touch on this. I was getting back to the like the flow of the film. I was so into the Fight Club scenes themselves because there's a period from the time he like says goodbye to Marla Singer, and then that's when it goes into his creation of Fight Club.
Mhm.
You meet Tyler Durden, and then your like focus is on Tyler and Brad Pitt and this relationship and trying to figure out who that guy is. I totally forgot that Marla Singer was a character in this movie until she came back. Like I forgot that she was even a thing because I was that
Mhm.
into figuring out like what is Fight Club, who is Tyler Durden, why is this guy so weird but at the same time so like interesting, you know?
Mhm.
And there's two quotes that really spoke to me, and I forget who said the one, but it was the bridesmaid dress quote. You love it for one day and then you throw it away. Was that Durden that said that?
It was
Mhm.
Marla.
That was
Yeah,
Marlon.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, with the dress.
So
She bought it for $1. Someone loved it
yeah,
immensely for one night and then threw it away.
Probably how she
yeah,
feels.
Yeah. There's a lot of that,
yeah.
like, use it, throw it away. Like, he's talking about his single serving friends, his single serving whatever, which is very clever, he says. Like, but yeah, there's a lot of that. Like, again, consumerism is all about disposability, like, very disposable. Everything's
Mhm.
very disposable.
Um, yeah, and then the other quote that I really liked was Tyler's working jobs we hate so we can buy stuff we don't need. And I
Mhm.
even say that in my classes sometimes, like, and I'm capitalist, of course. I live in the United States of America, but that's what I tell my students, like, the jobs that you're gonna have, in my marketing class, like
Yeah.
it is like if you become a marketing person, your job is literally to convince somebody to spend money on
If they don't have
something
it.
that they don't need, right? You know what I mean? And that's going to be your job one day. And
Right.
it's great because people love buying things. There's nothing wrong with it, but I don't know. As a business teacher, that really spoke to me because I'm like, if I work for like a candy company or something, right? I don't need a chocolate bar, but if I'm a marketing person for a chocolate company, my job, I get paid to literally make you think that you need that chocolate bar. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, um, I really like that quote a lot. And why I love Tyler Durden, why I love that character before I found out that it was just a figment of Edward Norton's imagination, whether it's right or not, his mannerisms, he does help people achieve their dreams. And you see that at the convenience store. Yes, the man was held at gunpoint. Yes, he threatened to come to his house if he didn't go back to school. But you know what? Tyler even said to Edward Norton, I guarantee you, when I go to visit that guy in 1 month, he's going to be enrolled in a veterinary program. And I was like, Tyler, your mannerisms aren't the best, but I dig it. I love it. You are
All right.
helping people
All right.
achieve the things that they want to do in life.
Brandon, Brandon,
So,
I do like
yeah.
that scene, but I have to ask you: does that mean that you're saying that the ends justify the means?
Um,
Because realistically, you're right. He probably got that guy to vet school, but he also probably traumatized him for life.
Yeah.
but hey, whether he
But you
got a
dig it.
D or an A, he's still a doctor.
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
still
Like Joe said, Tyler Durden ends up being this gigantic hypocrite.
oh,
It's
big
like,
time.
what are you doing? Like, you got a guy on
Yeah,
the ground. Like, what do you got going on? You know what I mean?
yeah, dude.
So I don't. It's yeah. It's kind of emptiness there. I do. There's a
hey,
phrase from
he's
the
just
movie. He also says like the stuff you own ends up owning you. I'd use
Mhm.
that sometimes. Like you want to make sure like what you own doesn't own you or something like that. That is true. By the way, this is movie minds, not like whatever minds, but that's a question. Like if you're getting paid to convince people to buy stuff that's not good for them or they don't need, is that unethical?
Ooh,
Like is that a problem?
Wait, can you repeat that? You cut. Did you ask if it's ethical? Sorry, you
I'm
cut out.
saying, is there a problem? Like if your career, you're getting paid to convince people to buy
Ooh.
things that they don't have money for, they don't need, and is bad for them. Like, what's the ethical ramifications of that? That's a good question. That's a question to think about.
Have you ever
That,
seen the
that is a good
movie
question.
Thank You for Smoking?
Oh, that's a good movie.
I think
Yeah,
yeah.
it literally answers that, right? Isn't he like the director of marketing or something for a cigarette company?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it raises deeper questions
Mhm.
like like advertising. Like there's one thing like people have free will and like they free to buy what
Don't
you
do it
want,
anyway.
but advertising is almost like hypnosis. It's like magic. Like convinces people of things. But anyway, I,
Well, yeah,
I
I don't want to go too off on it either, but just as another example, I don't know if you guys, either of you, have seen Breaking Bad, but there's a character in there. I think it's one of the characters basically says like one of the guys that's developing the methamphetamine. He's basically saying, I'm just providing a service for people that are gonna go out and do it anyway. I might as well make it good. So it's saying, he's kind of facilitating something that is terrible. He's adding to this terrible thing, and his excuse is, people are going to do it anyway, so might as well, get something out of it, right?
mhm.
So obviously that's in the illegal world, but you could argue that, a lot of things, marketing, business, it's legal, but is it always ethical? I don't know. That is an interesting question.
And unfortunately, the way I would answer that is, unfortunately, in life, you have to go to work every day and you have to make a living. And what I tell my students is, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right? That's why I became a teacher because I think our careers are very ethical and good for society, right? But unfortunately, there's people that aren't in the same boat as us, and they have to go to a job and they have to provide for their families. And you asked about the ends justifying the means. Well, that's one reason why I think I left corporate America, right? Because the jobs that I had, I was like, I don't feel good about this. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So that's why I became a teacher. So I think it comes down to the person, right? Are you comfortable doing that? And if you are, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because you have to provide a life for your family. But if you're in the situation, whether financially, educationally, or just, mentally to do something where, you may be able to take a pay cut and do something you love, that's a blessing, right?
Mhm.
So it's now we're getting into like philosophy minds. Like this is some deep stuff, but that's one reason why I think that movie is so great because it brings up conversation like this. You know what I mean? That to me is the makings of a great film when you can
Oh,
have these types of discussions.
oh, absolutely. I mean,
Um,
yeah, the film gets you to think about that sort of stuff. Absolutely, you're right. I agree.
there, real quick. Sorry, there is what I have my last point here, and then
Uh-huh.
I have nothing else. But sorry, Brad, did you want to piggyback off that?
No,
I
no,
know
no,
I interrupted you.
no. Yeah, it
Um,
was a
my
digression. Yeah.
I dig-
from the first time watching this film, my aha moment since you guys asked like what was my take like watching it for the first time, the moment I realized that Tyler and the narrator were the same person was when he said, "That's why I blew up your house or your apartment." Because then I said, "Wait a minute, like you just met that guy on the plane, you wouldn't have done that like to someone you just met." I was like, "Okay, what's going on here?" Pretty sure this guy is not real. And my final question, kind of with that, is all the things that Durden was doing. Was that really the narrator? Like, did he hold that guy at gunpoint? Did he?
Yeah.
So that was the narrator doing all that
Yep.
crap?
It was
Hmm.
all him. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because
Hey,
remember,
just
go ahead.
I was going to say just a note on that. Like when I first started watching it with my wife, we we were just barely into the movie. Like Marla had been like shown up for 5 minutes. She thought Marla wasn't real. She thought maybe
Oh,
Marla was in his mind. So I was like,
oh,
you want to say anything at the
Oh.
time? And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. Because the way she was like walking out in the street and nothing's hitting her, and like the way she was acting, like she thought Marla was a figment of his imagination.
well. Also, remember, Brandon, Tyler is just kind of the way for the narrator to sort of excuse his actions, which Tyler explains. So yeah, remember that's all him. Like the narrator is the person doing it, and it's like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation. It's just an aspect of him he's kept hidden, basically. So it's him.
Okay.
Also, I loved what Brandon said about bringing forth the deeper difficult conversations. I do think that is the mark of great movies for sure, and but to try and tag it down a little bit because I got to try and do that. What did you guys think about the comfort animal, the CGI penguin?
Oh,
Oh yeah, I liked it.
Did you
The
think it was a
talking
little?
penguin. I liked it.
It fits with the weirdness of the movie, I guess, but I always forget about it. It's so strange. It's so
the two
surreal.
things like you mentioned that like the penguin, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then Lou, and you remember Lou? I'm like,
Wait.
Lou, the guy who owns Lou's Tavern.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah, Lou.
okay. Oh wait,
Love
Lou,
wait,
for
that
that's
some
right.
scene.
reason, like,
Also, that's right. There's a mafia movie for 5 minutes. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, the
Owned by
mafioso Lou. Yeah.
oh, also another thing that's totally unrealistic. He beats up the mob guy, the maid guy in his bar, and he's just like, "Oh, you guys are too crazy. I'm not going to mess with you." No, this is a mobbed up place. They're
Yeah,
going to come back, the 20 other guys, and be like, "No,
tell
you
everybody.
either pay to use
Yeah,
the place or you're gone." You
yeah,
don't do that. So actually, I love that part because I love mafia stuff. But no. That's
yeah.
total BS. The total BS. No, sir. No, sir.
Um, one critique I had too, because and it's what's keeping me. I'm not going to talk about my rating, but it's keeping me from giving it a higher rating than what I was going to give it.
Ooh, this should be
Um,
good.
we really, and this is again, kids. If you're listening to this, do not watch this movie alone. Get parental consent. And if they're good
Parents,
parents, they will tell you to watch this when you're 18. You should not be watching this movie. End of old man rant. Um, you
they're all
really
gonna
could have
watch it. It's
you
reverse
really could
psychology.
have done well. We didn't need all the. It's just like my complaint with Napoleon. You didn't need all the sexual references. Like I thought that was
Well,
so like
gratuitous.
I don't need to watch this. Like this would be a good movie without this. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, you're right. It could be gratuitous. I don't know. When it comes to that stuff, I think I think that having a certain degree of I don't I guess sexuality or sexual references when it comes to a narrative story, I think that unless those scenes and serve a particular purpose in the story or the tone, the atmosphere you're trying to sell, like something about the scene shows how much these people love each other or something else, and it works, sure. But if it doesn't really add anything to the movie or to the story, to the narrative, I think it's unnecessary, and it might just be something to sell the movie, like the violence. Like if the intense violence actually fits for the story. In this case, I think it certainly does. It adds to it.
Hmm.
That's fine. But you're right. It depends on what the goal is and how it works as the audience receives it. But you're right. I think sometimes it's probably more acceptable than other times. You don't think so at all for this though.
I don't. I think you could have realized that Marla and the narrator had a promiscuous relationship without having to show things. I think there was way too much genitalia reference that was not needed. Inappropriate in my opinion. And I think I'm consider myself a religious person, right? So, and I'm Catholic, and I don't know. I think in a movie, I don't like a lot of sex stuff. I don't. I think that's an intimate thing. That's something between you and the person you love. And I don't think there was a lot of that in this film. right?
Yeah.
So to me, I don't like that. I don't even like, and I'm a huge Blink 182 fan. You guys know that. But just to bring it back on them,
Oh
one thing I
man,
don't like, one thing I don't like about them is they make way too many immature jokes about that stuff, right? And they don't now that they're older. But yeah, I've never been a fan of that humor, and I've never been a fan of something that's supposed to be intimate between you and your spouse, and glorifying it with someone who's not your spouse. Does that make sense?
sure. I will say, from what I understand about the author, like I said earlier, he kind of goes into a lot of that stuff. It's just kind of some of the stuff that he tries to kind of look into, just as a part of society and I guess an aspect of the human experience. So, if it makes people uncomfortable, I'm pretty sure that's Chuck's goal. And so the film was probably echoing that, both the violence, the subject matter, and I think that artistically, sometimes maybe some people would argue you got to go to those places, but I totally get that though. If it doesn't serve the story, though, I don't think you need it. Though I don't remember too much of that in this movie, though, from what I can recall.
Right. There was
Mostly between Durden and Marlowe.
just a few graphic things,
Pretty
definitely
brief, though,
there.
I think.
Fairly brief, and I think again, the reason I don't mind it in Fight Club is because I think it serves the purpose of the message of the movie. It shows the transient nature of the way they're living. They're treating each other and each other's bodies and themselves uh,
Terribly.
very terribly, very throwaway culture. Like she talks about the dress, you love it and you throw it away. Like she realizes she's being used and they're being used. They're in this dilapidated house.
Ugh.
It's she almost ODs on I forget what she took, Xanax. I forget what it was, but she almost overdosed. It's just it
Yeah,
yeah. It's very dark. It's very transient. But like you said, like Chuck Palahniuk's saying, like this
it's
is
not good.
this is the world we've made for ourselves. And this is the caricature of masculinity that is being shown out there. So it's like this: if you're a man, what do you have to hold on to? Either this, like you're a macho man, you sleep with a bunch of women, you get in fights, walk around with your chest out, and or you're this wooden, robot
All
man who works in all like he's a schmuck, he's a putz, you know,
Mhm,
and so they're both bad. They're both bad
mhm.
for you, you know. So I know what you mean about I usually don't like the gratuitous sex scenes or good. I don't like anything like the older I get or the more maybe being a father, even someone like the gory things or graphic things. Not this movie didn't have, but some other movies I'm like, I could do without some things.
Mhm.
But I think it's there. It's part of the fist that's in the glove, and I think that's why it's there. It's not for everybody. Like I wouldn't
Sure.
recommend everybody. Yeah, but yeah, I know what you mean, Brandon. But
Um, Thanks. Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to say about Durden, this is my last thought on him, and I think this is why I think a lot of people like him, and myself included. But and that's why I think Brad Pitt was kind of like the perfect role for it. But when he tells the narrator that I'm who you want to be, right? Because when you think Brad Pitt, especially like in the late 90s
Mhm,
and the early
mhm.
2000s in pop culture, that is the image that I think we gave the ultimate man, right? Uh Good looking guy, in shape, funny, witty,
Charismatic.
intelligent, and that was the perfect actor, I think, for them to pick the narrator to see himself as. You know what I mean? Like even you listen to songs back then and like the Shania Twain song, so he looks like Brad Pitt. You know what I mean? Like so getting back to what you were saying about the toxic masculinity or whatever we want to call it, like that was the perfect person to play a role like that in 1999. And I think that's why a lot of people like him because he's a likable guy and I'm not you got to be yourself, but let's face it, if somebody was like name one actor that you could be like and look like, I think a lot of men, especially back then, would have said Brad Pitt. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
I can get behind that. Yeah, I second that. Yeah.
Or Danny DeVito,
Enjoy.
maybe.
he has an appeal as well. For sure. There are some people that say, you know what, I want to be DeVito.
Yeah.
Look like Danny DeVito and just not care. Pure charisma. Yeah, that just goes to show though that's there's another way to do it. Absolutely. Napoleon, Tyler Durden. We should just recast all the greats with Danny DeVito.
Yeah.
He could do anything. Sure.
You want
Why
to do
not?
a spinoff? Do you want to do a spinoff on Movie Minds where we just take a movie and then we pick different actors and how we think that would have played out? Like, oh, if we would have used Kevin Spacey as Tyler Durden instead of Brad Pitt, this
Yeah.
is how the movie would be.
That would have be such a completely different feel to it. Like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's
It's the
weird.
different work. Like that's
Uh-huh.
what I envisioned. Yeah. No. I think they made the right choice with that one.
Oh, totally. I thought everybody was perfectly casted.
That was a
in
good
that movie.
casting job. That was good casting job. Yeah, I agree.
Definitely.
Very good.
Oh, real quick. Speaking of casting, Jared Leto, huge shout out to 30 Seconds to Mars. A lot of good bands in that movie.
They're
lot of
watching.
good
He's watching right now. Shout out, yeah, Jared.
Jared
Yeah.
Leto's like, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom
Dude,
of my heart.
come on. The Kill by 30 Seconds to Mars, that was like...
I like 30 Seconds to Mars. They got some. Oh, yep, they got some good songs. They did you know what? Maynard James Keenan featured on one of their songs, their first album. Yep, it was a Tool combo. Yeah.
What'd you say? Sorry, you cut out. What was it?
Maynard from Tool, man, did a guest spot on one of their early songs on their first album. Yeah.
Really?
So-
I never knew that.
Yep. Not one of their singles, but yeah, he was there. Yep. Tool throws along a lot of support. Deftones, absolutely. Yeah.
John B, man. That's the best Tool song. Sorry, now we're getting
Yeah.
on movies.
Let's not. If we start talking about
Music
Tool, that'll be 2 hours of me
Oh.
just talking about how great Tool
Cool
is. So let's
minds.
not. Let's. You joke, but yes, it could happen. All right. No, before we go there,
Hey, hold on.
Tool.
Fight Club.
Full time.
Somebody's watching this. Those guys are
Full time, yeah.
jerks.
So edgy,
Tool.
pretentious dummies. So full of themselves. Is like, oh man, it's so cool.
Whatever.
Dude, bros, like in Tool. Yeah.
Wait, Joe, quick question for you. Last question on Tool. Do you think the
Yes.
same people that are categorized as your typical Fight Club people are also Tool fans? Like, is it one and the same?
I'm not sure if it's completely one and the same, but there's probably some overlap because, like, all right, not to go off on this, but like I said, and this is going to make me sound like a total snob, but I feel like there's a lot of people that might watch Fight Club and be like, oh, yes, it's so thought-provoking, but, like, they don't know that many movies and they just gravitate to one part of it, or, like, they know a couple Tool songs. They're like, oh, man, Tool's so great, but they don't really listen to everything. They have kind of a surface-level knowledge. I do think there's some overlap in that type of fan, the stereotypical one. Yeah, I think there's some commonalities. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, we're so smart, but not really knowing it yet. Yeah, that's for sure. I hope I'm not one of those guys, Brandon.
No. In fact, when you told
No,
me
dude, I'm obsessed. Like, not to go off on a diatribe here, but literally, there was a point where if there was somebody who was even vaguely connected to one of the members, I would listen to their band and their music. Like, so liking Tool got me into so many other different weird bands. So if you're associated with Tool, chances are there's a chance I like you. So that's it.
That's awesome though, because like at the same time, not to get too much on music, but there's a lot of like really famous musicians that have these side projects with like people you never heard of before. And I think that's awesome that even like these like mega stars, like even my favorite musician, Mark Hoppus, he has stuff with bands that have not made it big. No, but it has to do with what you're saying. Like guys that are still trying to make it, but he's like this huge figure, yet he still like remembers his roots and like helps those people out, whether it's producing or playing bass or whatever. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. I love it when bands do that. And you could say that what Mark Hoppus does, which Tyler Durden does not do to get us back on track, is he lost track of his roots. okay, and got corrupted
he
by the
did.
idea he was supporting. So he did not look out for the little guy. So yes, be more like Mark Hoppus and not like Tyler Durden, people, please.
Totally.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't have too much more to say about it. Speaking of music, though, I just wanted to mention one thing I kind of liked about the movie that maybe Brad will appreciate it is that that very industrial new metal opening where it's like the Amanda and I were talking about, like it's a zoom out from like it looks almost like it's kind of a close up of a cellular organism, and it pulls back and it's CGI and it reveals it's just like a person. So we get like that internal view of the body going out, matched with like some electronic music with fast cuts and metal. That's very,
Yeah.
very late 90s, early 2000s. And it's just like all the superhero movies kind of emulated that opening. I'm like, so it's kind of dated, but it's
Yeah.
kind of charming. And so I think Fight Club may have helped inspire or at least tap into that style. So I liked that. I loved it when I was watching it, but I'm like, this is a little cheesy. This is so
Yeah,
1999.
it is. Yeah,
But so angsty and edgy, but I kind of
yeah.
love it. Yeah. That was my
You
last
need,
little thing
like
to
some
say
Lincoln
before I
Park.
get my grade.
Lincoln Park.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
no, this was a little before Linkin Park, though.
Yeah.
This
But
is
that's
this is
yeah,
a
it came
year
out of
before
there.
Hyper Theory came out.
Yeah,
Hmm.
drinking a Red
Just a
Bull
little
and
before.
like yeah,
Could have had some Nine Inch Nails or Corn or something.
yeah. Oh man, I don't want to go
That's
down.
right. I was a little too early for Lincoln Park. Sorry.
I had a friend that
Yeah,
was
that's
really into Corn.
Mhm.
Anyway,
I only like. All right, sorry. I'm gonna wrap. We have to get up back on track. I will say, I like Horn's first album. Nothing else equals that. Anyway, okay. There. Anyway, moving on.
That's fair.
Do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap up this podcast and give our grades and stuff?
no,
All right.
No, I thought
Wow.
that
Well,
was
this is
I thought that was
exhausting.
a really good episode, guys. Seriously.
Oh no, this is good. We all kind of came together, everybody, and we said we need a format. I got the template in front of me, so my documents while see my face. It's the only light I'm getting. But yeah, I'm kind of like trying to keep us organized. So hopefully I'm doing all right. You guys have been great. I love these conversations. This is awesome. Are you guys gonna make me go first with the minds grading again? Because I got my grading. I'm ready.
Brad, do you want to since
would
you
like
did
to-
Napoleon Joe, Brad, do you want to go or
Yeah, I'll go
I don't
for
want to go
Yeah.
first.
All
I'll
right,
go.
that sounds good. Okay.
I'll
Okay.
go first. So, all in all, as I said before, just to preempt my mind's rating, I tend to, as a movie watcher, as a cinemaphile, I tend to, when I'm watching a movie, I mentally place it in a certain category. Like, I think I talked about this to Halloween. Like, I'm not judging Halloween against all the other movies per se. I'm judging it against similar movies. So anyway, that kind of thing factors into it. Um, it's Fight Club. It like you said, there's some parts of it a little dated. It had a huge cultural impact in a way, kind of underground. It influenced a lot of things. I thought the casting was great. It's very dark. It's visceral. It's graphic in certain ways. It's violent in certain ways. But it has it's trying. I like movies. It has a message to tell you. It's not just some throwaway movie. It's trying to tell you something. Like you said, you can get too deep into it, whatever. But it's set out to do something. I think it did it pretty well. I think it's a really good movie. Um, again, the casting, a lot of the cinematography, the script was pretty good. I do think, speaking of Brad Pitt, I think I said this to Joe before. I think this is the most Brad Pitt character of all the Brad Pitt characters that just come to mind. There's some other characters, and Brad Pitt's always playing Brad Pitt playing that character, which is nothing wrong with that, but that's the way it is. So I really like Edward Norton in this movie. I think he did a really good job. He can be a chameleon a little bit in different movies. I like him in American History X. Like that's a different
great
kind of
job.
character. Like really, also a dark movie. But I'm gonna give Fight Club 4.5 minds. So really, really high. I'm not gonna give it 5 minds. Again, it just doesn't go all the way for me. Some things with the end. It's also not a movie that I'm probably going to watch again anytime soon. Like it's not it's not, it doesn't have a lot of rewatchability for me at this point. I have seen it a few times in the past, so 4.5 minds for me.
All right, Brandon, I'm gonna make you go next. I'm gonna go last this time.
Yeah, I can go next. Do you care, or
Go ahead.
do you want to go next? Okay. Um, so for me, just kind of piggyback off what Brad said a little bit. This is not a movie that the whole family can enjoy, nor is it a movie that, quite honestly, I would take a date to. It's not a movie I would sit down to watch with my wife. In fact, our producer did not want to watch this. She had no interest. So that's my negatives of it. It's for a very specific audience, okay? Um, and I think it does get a little too graphic. It's not something that I want people under the age of 18 to watch. So and me, that's a big deal for me, right? I like down to earth, like, wholesome movies. So I'm a little biased, but getting to the cinema critic in me, um, casting was phenomenal. Casting was phenomenal. I thought the flow of the film amazing. The surprise ending. It's a very to me, you gotta be paying attention. You gotta have some sort of knowledge, I want to say intelligence, to follow it and to watch it, right? Because if you're not paying attention, you're going to get confused. And I like films like that. I like films that make you think, because then that's what makes these surprise endings so much better. I think it'd be a movie to watch. Give yourself some time after you watch it the first time, then go back and watch it like maybe a couple weeks later, which I might do just to pick up on things that I didn't like the first time around. But I'll be honest, outside of two times, I'll probably never watch this movie again. And I don't think it's going to be a movie where somebody's like, "Oh my gosh, let's have a movie night and watch Fight Club," right? So given all of that, I'm going to give it a solid 4. I think it's a good film. I don't think it's perfect. I think it's a little too graphic, but at the same time, well written, good flow, amazing casting, and it was entertaining. So I'm going to give it a solid 4 out of 5 minds.
All right. Well, I get the easy job. How can I follow such great summaries and mini reviews after all you said? It's so tough. Uh, no, honestly, I kind of agree with everything you guys said. I think for me, obviously, when I'm looking at movies, I guess we're kind of sharing more of our thought process looking at films. I often try to look at things kind of as they are related to the genre. I try to think about the filmmaker's goal, if I can guess what that is, and what the audience is for it, because it might not be for everybody. And I also think about the appeal it might have to many people, how well it produces things and flows within itself, and honestly, how much I like it. My personal feelings too. I try to not let them interfere too much. But overall, it's a lot to juggle. Fight Club for me is a movie I think definitely was great at one point in my life, but I feel like in some ways, like I've outgrown it a little bit. That's not to say that I think it's not very well done, because I think it's a very good movie, even despite the datedness and whatnot. But I think that it tries a little too hard to be edgy in some ways, but there are still a lot of really great messages there. But two things hold it up for being, I think, really truly great. That's the ending, as I mentioned before. I feel like it just kind of teeters out a little bit and doesn't match the greatness of the rest of it. It's almost like it goes a different direction. And also, I think although that initial viewing and that twist is really good, I don't think it holds up to a lot of great rewatches. And I think that for the mark of a great film, for me personally, it's like from a personal perspective, if I really love it and I want to watch it over and over and over again, and I can keep getting new things from each viewing, I think that's great. And if it's a movie that I could watch maybe one time and it has such a big impact, I almost never feel the need to watch it again. Those are two ways that I kind of see greatness. And Fight Club is kind of like somewhere in between for that. I'd agree. I don't know if I would watch it too many more times, but I'm glad I watched it again. Casting, direction, lighting, editing, a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of interesting themes. Some good comedy thrown in there as well. Edward Norton is really good. He is kind of a chameleon. He can do a lot of great roles. Very good actor. So yeah, I'm actually with Brandon. I'm gonna leave this one with a solid 4 mines out of 5. I think it's very good, very good. But yeah, that ending teeters a bit, and I think rewatchability maybe not quite so much after the initial twist. But still really good. I think it's worth watching for a lot of people if you're really interested in film and a script with twist endings. '90s was the time for just surprise endings, and this is among the really good ones. So Fight Club, still classic, but not quite 5 mines material, or 4.5. And that's it. All right, everybody. Well, those are our ratings for the Minds for Fight Club. Thank you for watching or listening to this particular podcast. This is going to wrap up our November pick, though we might actually release it in December. We've got a busy month coming up. We're going to have, I think, a very, very short mini Minds on the ghost film Uninvited. One of our teacher friends kind of recommended that to us. So we're going to probably do a really quick recommendation on that as an afterthought for Halloween. And then we have our matchup, okay, that we decided, I forget if it was Brad or Brandon, which one of you recommended this, but we're going to do another face-off because people really enjoyed Frankenstein versus Dracula. So we decided we wanted to do, I think it was you, Brad, that said this.
Yes, yeah.
That was all Brad.
Okay. Okay, this is all Brad. Copyright goes to him. This is his brainchild. Yes, his mind came from his mind. I am a huge Batman fan. And I always say my favorite Christmas movie is Batman Returns. So if I get an excuse to talk about Batman Returns, that's one. And Brad had the great idea of, another Christmas Tim Burton movie to face off against, Edward Scissorhands. So some Titans, some Tim Burton legends here. We got Edward Scissorhands versus Batman Returns. I'm defending that one for sure. I don't know who's going to do Edward Scissorhands, but good luck because Batman Returns, baby. Let's go. I'm going to get my boxing gloves, my bat gloves. Bam, bam. Yeah, no. Yeah. So we're gonna do that as our face-off. I'm really excited for that. I think that'll be cool. And we are gonna listen to our coworkers, our listeners, students, whoever is watching this, and we want to hear from you. We're gonna put up the poll. What is going to be our subscriber listener pick? So put up some suggestions for a movie. It doesn't have to be a Christmas movie, but whatever the other pick for December you want to listen to, we'll put up the poll. You vote, and we will watch that movie and review it for you as well. So busy month coming up for December, but I'm excited. We're doing well. Yeah.
Sorry, real quick. Fight Club. I don't know if we mentioned it. Fight Club was our first viewer pick, right? Our first poll pick. Do we mention that?
Correct. Yeah. I don't know if we did. I think we
mentioned it.
Yes,
we mentioned it prior in another. Yeah.
It's been so long of this conversation. But yes. Prior, I think we might have mentioned Napoleon, but yes, yeah. So yeah, Fight Club was the pick of listeners. So decide what the next one will be. Absolutely.
Hey, and you know who's in Batman Returns? Who's in Batman Returns?
Danny DeVito.
Look,
like this is what I'm saying, man. A great performance by Danny DeVito. See, no, don't get me started. Don't get me started.
There we go.
No.
It's like Tool. Danny DeVito and Tool. Yeah.
No, don't. DeVito is great. He is a genius. So, okay. I'm going to wrap up this episode before we talk about 100 other things. Before I say bye, I'm going to tell my co-host, please say goodbye. Brandon?
Bye, everybody. And again, do not watch this movie if you are below the age of 18. Final disclaimer. Love all of you. See you next time.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much for watching.
All right. Thanks, guys. Yep. This is Joe signing off as well. Goodbye, everybody. And we'll see you next time. Keep those minds open for more movies.
The Movie Minds. It is a movie discussion podcast. I am Joe.
I'm Brad.
I'm Brandon.
But you don't know what you live. 7-2. You can't cover your eyes. Open your ears and